I want to talk about what exists now in world sports and what, until this moment, hasn't existed for the NFL. Steve, can you walk us through the opportunity here for private equity and the difference between just the traditional view of taking a controlling stake in a company and the operating business and starting to influence the decisions that it makes? What are we about to see take place in the NFL?
Well, that's a great question, John. The people are confused a little bit in that the private equity model applied to the NFL or applied to the NBA is very different. It is more, I would call it investment fund policy rather than private equity policy. Classic private equity firms go in and buy companies and then try to grow them and grow the revenues and earnings and globalize them. That's not the case with sports investments. Sports investments will be done by specialized funds like Arctos, Dial, already in existence today. And they take limited partnership stakes, and they're limited to 10% in this NFL deal, I think 30% in aggregate in the NBA deal. And those will be passive stakes, really made to open up the market for folks that want to invest in sports properties. And they've created an asset class. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say it's private equity buying in. It's a passive limited partnership position so that more people can have access and have capital into the booming sports business.
By improving the liquidity for some of these companies, Steve, does that necessarily increase the valuation? How do you think about that?
It doesn't necessarily increase the valuation, but given the values, for example, the average NBA team probably 20 years ago sold for plus or minus 300 million. Now it's 3.5 billion or so. So the amount of capital involved to buy an NBA team is large. So it would be helpful in terms of filling that capital gap, which used to be filled by wealthy individuals, but those numbers are huge at this point.
Steve, what do you think about unlocking value in some of these names in terms of where these companies are, where these sports teams can be seen? And I'm wondering, as some of the cable news versus streaming channel kind of arrangements are negotiated, do you think that a greater degree of PE involvement or just outside investment involvement is going to expedite that shift just simply to the higher bidder, not necessarily to some of the classic cable channels?
Well, I think the leagues really do a great job. Adam Silver and Udo have had great experience with the media, and the NBA contract was up like 2.6 times from the last time. The NFL contract also up dramatically. What really is the upside is sports have become globalized now. When we purchased the Celtics in 2002, there was no streaming, there was no capability for kind of massive live global distribution, and that's changed with streaming. And now we used to count fans in the tens of thousands. You can count fans in the hundreds of millions and even billions for many of the big soccer clubs, the global sports like basketball and football. So I think what we're seeing is a long-term trend of globalization of sports, and it's one of the few programs that aggregates eyeballs, and that's very valuable to the new media players and the old media players. And that's why you're seeing such increases in the rights.
I like that you went global. I know that you go global, and you have gone global, in particular in Italy. And I know that John is very jealous and talks about it all the time. And I think that we all really want your life. I do think, Steve, there's this question of whether you like international sports, European soccer still as really the mainstay. I see John kind of sighing with this frustration, as I call it, soccer rather than football. But I'm just wondering whether you want to stay with that kind of theme or whether you want to head back and invest more in the U.S. after the Celtics investment as well as others.
Well, I think everything is situational. Investing is all about the price you pay and the trajectory you think the business can go on. And so at Atalanta, we thought that was a fantastic franchise. We have a great partner in the Bacassi family, and so far that's worked out. There's a lot of luck involved, but we were very lucky to win the European Championship. So it's really situational. You need to look at clubs. We look at clubs all over the world in football, other sports, and it's all about where you see the trajectory going and what the price you have to pay to get there is.
Well, Steve, let's talk about the trajectory, and we can compare and contrast global sports with what's happened in the NFL. I was looking at the Nielsen ratings, ranking the 100 most watched programs in 2023. 93% of them, NFL games, which, Steve, is absolutely phenomenal. They've just dominated the highest rated TV shows in this country now for the last couple of years. Can you say the same thing about global sports. When we talk about European football, Steve, have we hit a plateau when it comes to the valuation of TV rights? Do you see any way of unlocking more value?
You know, I think for John, we talked 5 years ago and 10 years ago, we thought we'd reach plateaus, but we haven't reached plateaus. And again, the reach is growing because of streaming and multiple channel capabilities. And they've gotten more sophisticated about how to divide the packages up. So I don't think we've seen a plateau because it's so valuable to aggregate these audiences. And the NFL has done a fantastic job. They have a league that has parity. They have games that are important every week. The NBA has done a fantastic job with growing viewership and growing access to the game. And so I don't think we've seen the end of that yet, because the global, the worldwide internet companies, the Facebooks, the Amazons, and the old media, they need this programming and they need those eyeballs. And as you pointed out, that's incredible. In the USA, 93 out of 100 programs were sports related, were NFL related.
Can you say the same thing about European football?
I think European football is continuing. They continue to change the format of the Champions League, UEFA, Serie A, make the broadcast schedules better. So I think right now we're in a little bit of a lull in media rights in European football, basically because the streaming wars just ended, or didn't end, or it really ended 6 months ago, a year ago, when people realized that there's too many streaming channels, too many options, and so everybody's cut back on programming. So we've had these cycles. There's a kind of a momentary lull when there's bundling and unbundling, and right now things are less robust. But I think it will come back when there's mergers and acquisitions, and you come back to 4 or 5 global players who were competing for these sports properties.
Well, let's finish on acquisitions and your interest. Your name was associated with Chelsea Football Club a few years back, Steve. I just wonder whether you still have that interest in acquiring another club in European football.
We were looking at different clubs in European football, and we think it's continuing to grow. It's a great opportunity. There's lots of things that you can do to improve the product and expand the reach, as I said. And so, yeah, we think it's a really interesting area.
Steve, could you share with us cities, places, countries, just a better idea of the clubs you have looked at?
Yeah, I think they're right now. Media rights are down in France, and so there's some interesting clubs in France that need capital and to grow and come back, and the French market will come back. There are some interesting opportunities to play in, as you've seen, in the UK to move teams from the one division to another. So I think France, UK, and even some things in Spain.
Are you in any active conversations right now, Steve? I imagine if you are, you can't reveal the details of them, but are you in any right now?
Yeah, we're talking to several clubs right now, and I don't know if anything come to fruition, but we can't talk about who those are. But there's several clubs that we're talking to as we speak.